So, welcome to the Midlife Method podcast. I'm Rachel, your host, and I'm joined this evening by some women within the Kickass community. And tonight we're talking about the Midlife Muscle Metabolic Masterclass, and specifically talking about protein. So, how you harness the power of protein for midlife wellness, muscle maintenance, and metabolic health. What we're going to cover, we're going to cover muscle metabolism, why vital for everyone, especially midlife women, how much protein you really need and why it's beyond that one size fits all training. So you'll often hear that you should have 90 grams or this and that, and actually that's completely irrelevant. What is relevant is your personal circumstances. And then we're going to choices of protein, best sources, and what to avoid and why. So why is protein important? So lots of you might already know this. I think you know a two if you're not quite sure why protein is important. Most of you probably think you know about muscle maintenance. So women in midlife, it's really important because we lose between 10% perimenopause and postmenopause muscle if we're not replacing it through exercise and sufficient protein. So if you're doing the exercise without the protein, that doesn't work. You need both of it in order for you to achieve that. And there was a study that showed you need more protein post-exercise to simulate the same repair that younger get with less protein. Protein is also immune support. So those globulins and enzymes are made from proteins. So if you're not getting sufficient, may manifest itself in taking longer to recover from grazes or injuries, maybe slower recovery rates as well. So if you're finding you're getting DOMS and it's taking ages, it might also be because of that lack of protein. It's also really important, whatever age you are, to help keep you fuller for longer. So protein does take longer for the body to digest. So therefore, energy is released more slowly. It's better for your insulin mass. And then it offsets the effects of estrogen decline. So we know that during estrogen decline, we're losing lean muscle mass. So protein intake is going to help maintain that muscle tissue, which is important not just for the aesthetics, for helping you to keep your metabolism up. So therefore, burning more calories even as you're sitting around. But it's also really important actually for your health as well. So yeah, that's just going through those kind of key points again. So if you're thinking about it in like, I don't want any more protein, really think about the fact that even keep blood sugar stable. So you're reaching for a snack, thinking about will really help shift those cravings for sugar. Sarcopenia, so that's age-related muscle loss, as we've talked about, and hormonal changes. So this is an interesting one for listening in live or listening back later, is how much protein do you really need? If you break it down in terms of an exercise amount, you can see here that that really varies. So if you're sedentary, you don't really do very much, you need about 1 to 1.2 grams per kilo weight. So this is really important. It's not just about the activity, it's about how much weigh. Obviously that affects your overall macros and your overall nutritional profile. So of course it's going to affect how much protein you should have. So an active lifestyle. Now, again, what does an active lifestyle actually equate to? So we're looking at strengthening and cardio-based exercise 3 to 5 times a week. So you're averaging about 10,000 steps as well within that. So that's 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilo of body weight. And then when you're getting to the strength hypertrophy phase, so hypertrophy basically means a phase where you're really looking to build muscle for more aesthetic gains. So say some of you on this program are definitely in hypertrophy phase. I'm working in hypertrophy. You aren't there yet. But when you're at that phase, when you're really working max, so that you are confident and comfortable enough around your strength training, you've probably been doing it for a minimum of 12 weeks, and you're confident enough to try and work on 1 rep max, the absolute maximum you can lift in 1 rep. And then based on that, we work to hypertrophy where you work on 75 to 85% rep max in your strength training. Now, somebody like that is going to be needing about up to 2.4 grams per kilo of body weight, exercising about 4 to 6 times a week. So you can see that that is quite a lot, but it's conditional upon your weight and your exercise, what your aims are. And of course, your weight changes. So aware of your muscle mass, body fat, and your weight it gives you to empower yourself and to be fearful of. Oops. So getting onto the nutritious source of protein. So one of the reasons I've done this talk is that I've been noticing on some of the nutritional tracking, there's been some the most cropping up in people's tracking. And I can understand why, because I've been in the news this week as well. Suddenly there is protein products everywhere. It used to be low fat. When you went in the soup, you cannot walk down without something having added protein. So we're going to get onto that in the next slide. But these are the sources that you most want to concentrate on in your food. So we're talking chicken, turkey, and pork. Beef in moderation. Be really careful about beef because it's high in saturated fat. Fish, so white fish, breams, bass, cod, haddock, and your oily fishes like salmon, mackerel, sardines. So if you're feeling like a bit bored of fish, then just think about the variety that you can even just sticking to salmon. Your eggs and your quality dairy. And then you've got your plants like tofu, tempeh, lentils, legumes, and quinoa. And the other one is your high quality protein powders. So again, we're going to get onto that. So these kind of want to avoid and be very careful. I'm seeing a lot of processed meats, things like your kind of style meats, bacon, sausages. They are not what I would call that fit the principles. Like we always talk in the Kickass Midlife Method about don't restrict. Does it nourish your bones, brain, and body? Don't. They are high in saturated fats, so they're going to increase your cholesterol risk. And they can be packed with nitrates and nitrites, which are linked to a higher cancer risk. And they can promote inflammation. So our bodies are already in a bit of an inflamed state due to hormones, or can be. So anything that we can do to avoid adding to that is a good thing. So yes, and there's this research by the World Health Organization which showed regular processed meat intake is associated with increased risk of type 2 diabetes and heart disease. And those conditions were already more susceptible to in midlife anyway. So, such a hard thing to replace those kind of sources with other delicious protein sources. There's no real reason to have processed meats. And then getting onto these protein added foods. So, I'm seeing protein added bread. You don't need protein added bread. Lots of these foods. And the reason why, particularly when you're thinking about your protein bars as well, just look out for these kind of ingredients. This is why they're not great. You can be packed with sorbitol, so these kind of sugar holes. So some of you are saying sometimes you're feeling a bit blue, you get gut disruption. It could be because of the ingredients that are in the type of protein added foods that you're having. Seed oils and emulsifiers, so look at your ingredients for that. Increase inflammation, exacerbate hormonal imbalance. And then you've got these low quality plates. So poor bioavailability. So what that means is your body actually can't absorb it. So you can't, it's like completely packed with something that your body is not able to absorb and use anyway. So it's completely, and then high in ultra processed carbs, a lot of those, a bit like the low fat thing. Fat replaced the taste of fat with sugar. Often it's happening in ultra processed protein added foods as well. So in the end, you're doing spiking your blood sugar, increasing maybe insulin resistance, so which is a big concern if you've come to any of my other or listen to any of the other podcasts around midlife that I've done so far. And then excessive, I don't often see this very much actually in anyone's nutritional tracking, but it's worth being aware of. that an over-reliance of, your cheeses, your milks, your yogurt might be one that sometimes creeps in with people where if you're short on protein, people can keep, so that can lead to some gut issues. Talking about it, it can cause an acidic imbalance, or pH balance. But then more interestingly, in midlife for women, some women can develop an intolerance to the proteins in dairy. So, and in gluten, a separate aside, but gluten and dairy can cause problems, but in midlife due to hormone change. So, one of the programs I do, not very regularly, my 28-day shred program eliminates some of those foods and introduce it back in just for people that affect. So it may be something if you're often feeling like, oh my God, like bloated tummy and it's painful rather than just bloating because of something, then it might be worth you having a little taking gluten and dairy out and just introducing one thing at a time and just seeing if there's any difference. But that's separate, obviously, from the protein sources that we're talking about here to avoid. And then protein bars. So as I touched on, there are some very, it's become like that thing now where you go to, I think, WH Smith or supermarkets where the protein bars are now front and center at the cash register. So you think, oh, it's great, that's healthy. Actually not. So some of the worst offenders are bars, which are absolutely everywhere. So they're high in those kind of those sugars. So it can cause digestive discomfort and also is probably not helping to keep you feeling full. The fulfill bars as well, pulsifiers and my protein, which are also tend to be everywhere as well. So your better choices are Bebels, are beginning to actually, so you should be able to get this whole, the Tribe protein flapjacks, which you can get in multi-packs as well in supermarkets, and then obviously your home bars with oats and nut butter and maybe even a bit of your good quality protein powders in there, and which I've come to. So this is the thing, like I recommend on the program a vegan one just because then it covers everyone, and the one I do because it's hasn't got emulsifiers and artificial flavors in it. So it's a good quality one for you to use that will do the job. If you want to use a different one, then what you really want to be looking out for is these ingredients to avoid. So your added sugars and artificial sweeteners, your soy protein isolate, which is processed, which are the gums. So watch out for them if they've got anything like that in them. And actually in all, a lot of processed food, look out for that stuff. Artificial colours are preservatives, trans fat, and your maltodextrin, which spikes blood sugars. So before you buy your protein powder, your protein powder, just have a look at the ingredients first to check. If it's cheap, is often a reason why it's cheap. And the other thing also to look at when it comes to protein powder is actually how much protein there is in there. I was just looking at the willpowers actually become really, really popular. Good quality ingredients, but per serving, as opposed to the Form Performance Protein, which has got 30 grams. So, you bang for your buck if you're just, trying to do one protein shake and get your 30 grams in. That's why I recommend the Form one. Minimal processing, short ingredient lists, natural sweeteners, stevia, monk fruit, clean protein sources. So the whey isolate is pea protein is another one, for instance. Added nutrients can be good, low salt, sodium, and gluten-free certification, which the Form one is if you do have that sensitivity over it. And the whey isolate if you're lactose sensitive. And then this is for worth knowing. I think what is often confusing around exercising in your protein is you think people often have got to be in this high protein phase forever, have to enter a high protein phase. If you're getting into the hypertrophy phase there for long, it's really about if you've ever trained for a marathon or properly for a half marathon, you have these blocks which are more intense than everything else, and then it cycles out of that block into a taper. Much the same kind of thing goes on with high protein phases. You have an increased daily protein intake to support that kind of muscle growth repair, and then you would phase out of that after a certain block, go into a maintenance phase, and that's how you cycle your macros, which I've touched upon before, which if someone's training with me for 6 months to a year, kind of macro cycling, and that changes as we progress your training. High protein is good pre and post workout. So I've done a podcast in the past about why protein is important actually sometimes before you train as well, because in midlife, just to touch on it briefly, in midlife, sometimes we can go out without eating, and if we're running or doing an intense exercise, we can be in danger of using muscle as an energy store, so as an energy to support the training. So you don't want to do that. So that's why you're timing before the exercise, so actual muscle maintenance. And then as I was saying, this kind of cycling a deload week, which is kind of a recovery week from strength training, is again when your protein might drop a little bit. But adjustment all the time, listening to your body and being really strategic about your performance and your goals, and being on with me as your coach to make sure you're communicating that, and vice versa, so that we know you're on the right kind of macro quantities you are in your training. So, final thoughts and takeaway is to remember that protein is essential. It's not optional at any age, but especially critical after the age of 5 when I wasn't at the other side. I want to be really clear as well that not about a high protein diet. It is about a protein consciousness. I mean that most women, when they come onto the program, are eating insufficient protein for maintenance. Not even talking about hypertrophy, building muscle, we're talking about maintenance. So when I talk about protein, most of the time what I mean is having sufficient protein for maintenance. So it's protein focus, not protein consciousness, not a protein focus. And it's really, really important, looking at some of the nutritional tracking that I've been looking at, is that quality matters as much as quantity. So it's not about just eating any old protein. Your beef, if you're constantly using beef, sausages, deli meats, they're not good sources of protein. Neither are protein added ultra processed foods, because all of that protein added food is an ultra processed food. Most of you would say there's no way I touch ultra processed foods, but protein added food processed. And think about optimizing, restricting your diet, about thinking about all those proteins, those good, healthy, nutritious protein sources I mentioned, and starting to incorporate them a little bit more into your diet. So thanks for joining. I hope that was useful. I'm just going to open floor to questions now. So if anyone's got any questions, it can be about this, it can be about anything. Adding protein powder to your food, like you can. Silken tofu is a great dessert, so it's a really good idea. And for you can whip them up and make dressings with silken tofu is a good idea with your protein powder. I've had various successes with protein added recipes. So I'd be interested in hearing what how anybody deals with that. Form Performance Protein, Jan, is the one I recommend. I recommend the chocolate. The others have got a really weird taste. I think the chocolate peanut one's the best one. There's also as well, you know, a flavor. So you could potentially use that in other 120 grams plus of protein a day. Yes, and that's exactly it. It does seem counterintuitive to losing weight, but yeah, that's often with women our generation who are, if I eat too much food, I'm going to put on weight. But actually, what's happening most of the time is women our age are restricting calories for, and you've properly added up all those snacks that you're having to avoid eating meals. Is probably about, you know, you're probably not going to the calories that you think. And if you are restricting too much, you're likely to be slowing your metabolism down. So you want to kickstart. I mean, I think as I said to you, Carla, actually in the group, and you, Jan, as well, actually, sometimes if someone who often wakes up in the morning and doesn't feel hungry, that can sometimes be a sign of a slower metabolism. So it's really about you start kind of kickstart your metabolism a little bit. Michelle, protein, touch a bit on fiber. Can you come on and ask that question?
Yes, sorry, I'm just trying to start my video. Okay, there we go. Hello.
Hello.
I just, as much as I read about protein, I read a lot about fiber and how fiber is a thing that we should be on as much as protein, or are we getting that just in the veggies that we're eating?
So if you follow all of you, if you're really conscious of all three macros, then getting that in your legumes and your quinoas and in the recipes, they've got like the chia seeds, they've got flax seeds and the vegetables. So that's also why I'm always emphasizing making sure that if you just go by the basis of looking at your plate, if you did nothing else, which some people on this program have done, follow the recipes without even tracking, you will lose weight and optimize your performance because it's got it all there. If you do nothing more but look at your plate and think before you eat, has it got greens on it? Has it got a lot of greens on it? With your protein source and your healthy fats, you'll be getting your fiber. So what I often see sometimes is people with photographs, they'll have their tiny little like sprinkling of rocket shoved on the side with like nothing, and no wonder people afterthought. A recipe sheet last month about making the standout player on your plate, because if you also it's optimizing food with hardly any calories in it, so you feel even fuller, it's better, it's got fiber as you say, and you're not cutting the balance of your nutritional intake.
Got another question, but I don't want to hog it. So if anybody else has.
Yeah, go for it whilst you're here.
Okay. My other thing was about fat. I mean, I've obviously been only tracking my food with you for the last couple of days, but I've noticed that like my fat content is high, like higher than you said that it should be. And I wonder, and
Yeah.
obviously I know that there's so many great benefits to it, but it's also mega high in fat. So is it just about kind of like creating the balance?
Yeah, so I've done a podcast about this actually as well. So if you're hitting overall, so I can't remember what yours is, but if you're hitting your overall intake for your goals, so let's just say your intake is meant to be 1,800 calories, for want of a better argument. And what macros you're hit, but actually the fats you're eating is maybe a little bit higher, and the carbs that I've set you is a little bit lower. That actually doesn't matter as long as you're hitting your calories, and as long, obviously, with the caveat that those fats are healthy fats, not saturated fats. So as you say, I've done this a podcast on how actually you can manipulate your macros, if you're someone who actually likes more of a fatty diet in terms of your meats and your fishes and your avocados. Obviously, fats have got the highest calories per gram, but it doesn't matter if you just manipulate more fats in your diet and slightly less carbs, for instance. We're bleeding into the keto zone, which I think is sustainable. But yeah, it's not a problem.
Thank you.
Yeah. So metabolism versus fasting benefits, Carla. I'm not a fan of intermittent fasting for midlife women at all, because there is many reasons. I think a lot of, in fact, lots of women come programs say yes, but and then intermittent fasting is completely like the opposite way. You've got to control everything about the way you eat and when you can eat. And also you're starving your body does is slow you down and completely increase your risk of decreasing your muscle mass. So I think for midlife women, about getting kind of behind the mindset of nutritious and nourishing food and eating 3 meals a day. Definitely intermittent is something around that in terms of longevity, but I think for midlife, getting that food right, and your goal is weight loss, so therefore metabolism and muscle maintenance. Past recipes. So if you're on the premium client, there are past recipes in a different group. So yeah, quite sure, but in which case you should be in that group to have access to all of those. Average water take of having too much water. So it's really really a question. I don't think that would be a risk for any. Cool. Well, great questions. Thanks for doing, and I hope that was useful. I'll put up the couple of days, and I'll share that one about the macros and how you can manipulate your macros in the group as well for you to have a look at. And see you later. Bye.